Coming up on episode 70 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Sacramento Kings are just continuing to struggle. Ben and I, we don't even know an answer. Are we worried? We'll let you know. The Eagles have been dominating. The Eagles have coming off a 10 straight. Can they continue that against the Commanders? We will talk about that and why they might be the best team in the NFL. The Niners, listen, they had some drama to deal with last week with guys walking off the field, but there's new drama. Do we pay Brock Purdy $60 million? Ben offers his take. We breeze by the Chargers and our betting picks. But with that being said, guys, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Rats. Ben, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Teams are struggling up and down, but it's coming up on Christmas and it's that joyful time of year, so I'm all good.
Yeah, and at least we don't have to worry about our teams playing on Christmas. We got a little break, so that'll be nice too. So let's start with the Kings as we normally do and back on our regular structure. As much as I don't want to talk about them right now because they're just doing a lot of things that frustrate me. Listen, we added a couple wins here on the win counter, but we are still below 500, and we are creeping to that point where we are getting to the midway point of the season, and we really need to fix some things up. But let's talk about the most recent game, the most disappointing, the Denver game, where we lost by 1 off of a Jamal Murray buzzer beater, or not buzzer beater, but he made the last shot. What was your main takeaways that it seems to be like an alarming trend for this team?
It's that first quarter, bro. You just can't keep starting games like this. The Kings come out and it feels like there's almost a lack of respect for the game in a lot of ways and respect of your opponent that we're seeing from the Kings side of things, because you see them come out of a few days off or come out of a break or whatever the case, and they're just not ready to play. And you go down by 23 in this game and have to play catch up through the next 2 quarters. And, mind you, they did, and it was great, but how many times are you going to start games so slow and have to dig yourself, out of a hole when it's so frustrating to see this team continuously just dig themselves into a hole and then have to climb out of it to get back to flush. And it takes so much effort to get back to flush. Meanwhile, the other team who had a great start to the game has been, essentially cruising the rest of the game and having great substitutions. So then by the fourth quarter, when you need to trade buckets, your guys are exhausted. Kings being our guys, they're exhausted. And when you have to make these plays and consistently go down the court, play monster defense, and then come back down the other side and have enough legs under you to shoot some threes, it's just not there. So it's tough. The biggest thing in this game isn't that last shot and last play. I don't care that DeMar fumbled the basketball. That's not the story in this one. The story is that beginning of the game was horrendous.
It's weird because I remember I caught on to the second half of this game, and you texted me, you're like, oh man, we're going to get romped early. And I saw that we were down 20. And I was like, oh, no, actually, we're going to be fine because we seem to be down 20. And then we always bounce back after being down 20. But you're right. Like I think we have been getting complacent, and we've talked about this since 2022 when they made the playoffs. We're like, oh man, hopefully they don't fall into the trap of thinking that they've already earned the right to be where they're at. And we saw teams like the Grizzlies go through that, and you have to, teams that are successful maintain success. And that's one thing the Kings got a little taste of and thought that they could sustain it. And it just goes to show just how difficult it really is to sustain it on a year-to-year basis without the aid of true superstars. And as good as our team is, and again, the Denver game, we were out 3 of our players. When we're out Kevin, Keegan, and Trey, those are huge rotational players. This game could have looked a lot different with them on the floor, but we had every opportunity to win that game without them. So that's no excuse to just say, oh, we were missing our guys. And for a while there, and that's another trend I've noticed with this team is we'll have a really bad quarter, and then when we're playing really, really well, we'll play well for good stretches, 12-minute stretches, and then we just sputter. And then it's like all the hard work we just did, we just lost again. and they just can never seem to get back into a rhythm once they lose it. And that's always the thing that's like worrisome with this team, because the whole point of getting Damar was so that doesn't happen. So I'm worried. I don't know about you, but I'm officially starting to, teeter on the worried thing. We're not out of the playoffs by any means. We're still very much in the thick of things, but I'm definitely worried. We need to figure out something soon.
And that's the thing, when I look at this game, the Kings mount that comeback. They're down 23. In the second and third quarter, they outscored the Nuggets 82-55, and they take charge of the game at that point going into the fourth quarter. They have a 8-point lead with 3 minutes left in the game, and all you have to do at that point, at the very least, is trade buckets with them, because you're not you can afford to give up some points as long as you're getting them on the other end. And what this team is built around is offensive firepower and clutch scoring. That was another reason you brought in DeMar, was another guy who can be that clutch weapon down the stretch. And this is now the 11th game that the Kings have finished within 5 points of a team, whether it be a win or a loss. But only 3 of those have been a win.
I was about to say
8 of them have been losses. And that's the part for me that's killing me. Because, let's say you flip those and you win. Let's say it's just completely flipped. You lose 3 and win 8, because going into the season, that's probably a safe assumption for us based on what we thought about this roster. You're thinking within 5 points, oh yeah, offensively, this Kings team can definitely win 8 of those 11 games. So if you do that, the story of the season is entirely different. So the Kings are, regardless of how they start games, what it looks like in the middle of games, they're not getting blown out on a night-to-night basis, but they're also not blowing out tons of teams either. We saw the nice stretch. I think there's probably 3 games now with Malik starting that we've won by a good amount of points. And probably 3 of those games we put up 140. At least 2 of them we put up 140 points. That's awesome. That's, like we talked about last week, the starting 5 is set. But now comes the time of the year. And we talked about it last week. We're going to talk about it more. This is the time of the year you have to invest in the trade deadline. I'm worried just like you are. It's at this point, it's not too early anymore to be worried. You are a quarter of the way through the season. You have essentially figured out who your team is at this point. Around the league, everybody knows who their team is. And if you don't, you're not looking at the playoffs. You were never looking at the playoffs in the first place. This Kings team was. They were absolutely looking at the playoffs. The playoffs was a goal. 50 wins was a goal. And right now, you're not scratching that. You're scratching another 41, 42 win season, which is a regression. And a regression won't keep a certain player here.
Oh, that's a great point. So a certain player that Ben's referring to is De'Aaron Fox. And Fox went on Draymond Green's podcast. And I'm only going to read just a quote, but it's the quote that, sticks out and resonates with, what we're potentially dealing with. So this was De'Aaron Fox on basically, they asked, I think Draymond asked him something in the regard of like, oh, how are you staying in Sacramento? Like, why didn't you sign that super max earlier this offseason when he was eligible for it? And Fox said this. He said, I want to make sure that we're in a position to try and win in the future, because that's ultimately what I want to do, Fox explained. I feel like I'm continuing to get better as a player every year. For me, it's, are we looking like we're continuing to get better year after year? Are we going to be able to compete at a high level? If we can show that this year, you sign the extension now. I love the city. I love being here. I would love to be here and retire here. At the end of the day, I also want to win. So you hear that, and that leaves, again, he does a great job of maintaining his leverage in whatever deal he wants, because he put himself in the position like, hey, I do love the city. You guys have done everything for me. We're building something together. I love it. But I'm not going to waste my career here. If we can't win here, I'm going to go somewhere else, is basically what he said. And that's something we need to worry about. And we've brought it up, whether it probably won't happen this year in the trade deadline, but it could happen next year. And it could, when he could leave, he can work his way out of here as soon as he wants. And that, when that, and if that happens, what kind of world are we living in? And that's a scary thing to think about.
It is, because a lot of the times you see these guys request trades off of teams, a lot of these star players that request a trade. And because of the way that organizations have started feeding into these star players and can kind of, abiding by their needs and what their asks are and so on and so forth, you see them have even the leverage in trade talks. And we saw this a lot with James Harden, Kyrie Irving, guys like that, where they named certain amounts of teams or certain teams that they wanted to go to. And they essentially had a say in what the trade would look like. And that's kind of what I'm worried about. Because if there is a scenario that plays out where the Sacramento Kings regress and are not improving, and De'Aaron Fox requests a trade, and he says, because I completely understand it, he says he wants to go to X, Y, or Z team because he's done losing. I get it. You've been here for years and years, losing for years and years. I get it.
Yeah.
The organization would probably understand it. And they would most likely have to cater to his needs. And so then you're limited. Versus if you figure out the team and get it working and find trade pieces that work and you're able to improve the team and you keep Fox here. Or before he's able to request a trade, you talk about what's open and available for De'Aaron Fox. And that's something, dude, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not calling for it by any stretch, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Kings start to explore options sooner rather than later if certain players aren't available for a trade that they had in their, idea going into this deadline.
And listen, I'm going to give you credit because you were right on the money with the timing of it, right? Last pod when we talked about it, you're like, it's not too early to start talking about these trades and potentially the Kings getting involved. And then, we see a couple trades happen. Thomas Bryant goes to Indiana. Dennis Schrader goes to the Warriors. That's a huge trade for them. Like you have these teams trying to make these moves now because it isn't too early. And this is the time where you need to try and, as a middling team, you need to figure out, are we going to try and make this team better now? Or are we going to punt on the season? Because we are starting to get to that point where if we don't improve one way or the other, we're going to be stuck waiting for that answer, and then we're just going to be in limbo. And who knows, maybe we make the play-in, but then where are we going to be after that? There's no guarantee that if we make the play-in, that Fox stays either. So we're in a tough spot. And we weren't thinking, I don't think we were really thinking about this because we anticipated this season to go a lot better. But the injuries got in the way, inconsistent play. And I would say, yeah, it's just kind of been a bummer so far. I just hope that this team can rebound there and if that starts with a trade, I hope it's a good one. I'm worried about where this team is going if they can't, because I believe in the talent we see on the court. It's not like I'm not afraid of the five guys, our starting five, when they're on the floor. Even our bench guys, I feel good about the lineups that are out there, and they just can't, they just don't produce. And that's something that at the end of the day, you will have to make a decision. Okay, it's not producing the results we want, so we have to find something different.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part about this. And I talk about, Foxy potentially being involved in a trade. And initially the reaction is going to be, for all us Kings fans, like, why in the world would we ever do that? Like, Fox is a major piece of this team and he's vital to the success of the Sacramento Kings. And I don't disagree with you. But for people who, want to say that De'Aaron Fox is the sole reason why the Sacramento Kings are succeeding or not succeeding, I would disagree. Because I want to highlight one stretch of the last game that stood out to me just as an example, because I've seen it a lot this season, and I talked about it earlier in the season. Like I said, the Kings had an 8-point lead with 3 minutes left in the game. At that point, you can just trade buckets. But we weren't making shots. And you could tell that De'Aaron Fox, he was getting to his spots, he just wasn't hitting them. And you got this sense of just the lack of leadership out on the court once again. And you got that sense of lack of leadership in the first quarter when they went down 20 points and nobody could pull them out of that funk. You need somebody out on the court, regardless of what your coach is as a leader or not. You need somebody out on the court who can take command of the basketball game for your side. And that's something that I just haven't seen from this team. I've seen guys have great individual efforts. Fox put up 60 points the next night, put up 49. Killer, right? but he won one of those games, and it wasn't his 60 bomb. And a large part of my frustration with this team is it just seems like it's a bunch of really, really good pieces, but without a true identity. And that identity often is found with a leadership on the court. And, I then start to question Mike Brown in a lot of ways. And I'm not calling for him to be fired, because he's the best Kings coach since Rick Adelman, in my opinion. But it's so frustrating for me to see this team continue to struggle with the same things over and over. Now, you talked about, there's one more thing I want to bring up here. You talked about that, Draymond Green podcast that De'Aaron Fox was on. Another thing that they talked about was, Draymond was like, I don't really understand how you guys are struggling. The only thing I can kind of pinpoint it is, Mike Brown, his identity is a defensive coach, but you guys are not great at defense. And De'Aaron Fox, paraphrasing here, he essentially said something along the lines of, we just don't have the personnel for it. We don't have a shot blocking big. They don't have they have the athleticism, but they don't have the strength to keep up with a lot of these big guys. And Aaron Gordon completely took over the first quarter of the last game. He had like 20 something points, I think, or I can't remember how many, but he was killing it in the first quarter, like just murdering us. He was getting to every spot he wanted to be in, and he was always finding himself wide open. And when he wasn't wide open, he was bodying whoever would switch onto him. So with whatever the Kings are trying to run systematically, the personnel doesn't fit. And this is where I'm concerned that there might be a little bit of maybe a disconnect between Monty McNair and Mike Brown, because I feel like Monty is trying to build a team one way with certain pieces, but Mike is coaching a different style than what Monty kind of is envisioning.
I buy that.
And that's where it gets concerning, man.
Yeah, and again, then that comes to the point of, okay, if it's Monty's job because Mike can't pick the players, not entirely, but Monty's the one who brings them into the building, he trades for them, he signs for them. Then it's his job to recognize, listen, we tried this whole offense first approach, and we need to be more balanced. And hopefully, we've been saying this the past few years, hopefully he finds something via the trade deadline where he can round out the roster to be a little bit more balanced. And that's when we talked about in other pods, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Jeremy Grant's available now, Kyle Kuzma's available now. When you bring size into the building, we need size and guys who will give us that extra hustle. That's why Dorian Finney-Smith sounds like the best idea in terms of like, we don't need another star. We have plenty. We just need more complementary players to round out the roster and help our stars really, be able to like take a possession or two off and then do what they do best. Because I look at a guy like Keegan and he is that, but he's him and Keon's the guard version and Keegan's for the forwards. That's all we have. We don't have anyone else in any other position. And that's the part that we always struggle with. So if we bring one or two more dudes in the building that can complement the offensive firepower that we have, I think we would be in a better spot and we wouldn't have to rely on us putting up 140 just to win games.
So you talked about somebody just now that I know you've talked about before with me, on the pod and especially off the pod. And I'm not sold on this guy. And that's Kyle Kuzma. This season, I haven't really been keeping up with him. I don't know exactly how he's doing. But I know that Washington Wizards team is pretty much a train wreck, as much as it is any year. Is a Kyle Kuzma an option that makes sense? Like for me, I don't see it, but again, I'm not paying that close attention. I don't know if you can kind of change my opinion on that.
Oh, I guess it really depends on what we're moving. It depends on the pieces we're moving them for. And that is a good point. When we talk about Kyle Kuzma, if it would have made more sense to bring him in the offseason in DeMar's position that we have him, right? Because I think if you do trade for him without trading a DeMar or Keegan, then to ask him, who, Kyle has been, a starter over the past 5 years now since he's left the Lakers. He's just been a full-time starter, basically the number 1 or 2 option every single year, to then fall back to he'd probably be the 3rd or 4th scoring option again. So last year, and maybe in the offseason without DeMar, it would have made more sense. So the name has been floated around, but the fit would be a little curious this year for me. Would I be opposed to it? No, because technically, if stuff goes sideways, he's a player that you maintain for on a nice quality contract. You could trade for more pieces later. So you could try it, but if the other options are available who fit the roster a little better, this year I would definitely lean more towards them. But
Yeah,
and this year he's been having a down year.
Yeah, that's frustrating. This is the tough part with the Kings because on a night to night basis, they show us a different look.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
in a lot of ways, this is the worst case scenario because we talk about there needing to be consistency so that you know what you need to address when it comes the trade deadline or it comes the offseason or it comes to re-signing guys, whatever the case. You need to show some form of consistency. And through 20-something games now, we just haven't seen a consistent stretch of basketball being put together by this team. And this is what is concerning, like, especially this time of the year, where you see a team like the Golden State Warriors who have found a form of consistency. Yes, they've been stumbling as of late, but they found a form of consistency and addressed an issue that they knew was looming, and that's their bench. They knew that their bench presence and the guard position specifically needed to be addressed. Well, they jumped the gun and hit it before anybody could. And they got a damn good piece to their team now. This is a piece that can make them not just, I don't think a contender, but it can make them a potential second round playoff team.
Yeah.
Like these are the moves that a team who has won championships, who has a lot of functionality, everything going for them, these are the kind of moves that they make because they have a form of consistency. They have an identity as an organization. Obviously, when you have a guy like Steph Curry, you know who your, consistency and you know what your look is going to be from a year-to-year basis, right? But it's concerning, man, because we're coming up on the deadline. We're not super close, but it's looming, and moves are going to be made soon, very soon. Obviously, they're already happening. We're going to see more happening, and if we don't have a true answer to our problems, I don't know what move fixes this team.
Right. And then the question is who do we end up punting on? Who is the sacrifice that helps us either pivot or retool? So we have to worry about those questions now because this season has gone in the worst possible scenario that we didn't think was going to be possible, barring getting injuries and struggling, these guys not meshing well and the defense suffering every now and again. So yeah, we're in a tough spot. And again, you and I mentioned it, we're worried. Does that mean we've given up entirely? Is there a path for them to succeed? Of course there is. And it starts in this last little home stretch. We're still in this 10-game stretch that we talked about last time, and we're 1-1 in that stretch. So listen, and we got 3 games in the next 3 out of our next 5 games are against the Lakers, who have also been up and down. So you got the Lakers, you got the Pistons in there. I know Grizzlies are coming up soon, but then after this little mini stretch, it gets tougher and tougher and tougher, and then you're gonna have to try, and you're trying to make up ground in a crowded Western Conference. It's going to be hard, but that's what happens when you hover around 500. You're going to be seeing inconsistent results, and you're going to have to rely on other teams. But it's up to these guys. We have to take advantage of some of these games. We have to beat the Lakers. We can't lose another one of the Lakers. We can't lose to the Pistons, and the Pistons are going to be a tough game. Like it's going to be that's the thing. I've gone back to the perspective of, like, as a fan, like, oh, every game's going to be tough. Like there's no guarantee that when I watch a game for Sacramento that I am 1,000% confident they're coming out on top. Not the way I felt in 22 when they were blowing teams out and coming out on top a lot. So I feel that angst, that uncertainty has returned as a Kings fan, and it's disappointing. It's disappointing.
Yeah, it's really disappointing because this was, if you put this roster paper in front of me next to the 2022 roster on paper, I'm going to laugh at you if you told me that the 2022 one made the playoffs over this team and through the same amount of games had a better record.
Yeah.
Like, I would find that hilarious. I'm like, first of all, DeMar DeRozan's in Sacramento, that's funny. That's funny enough. Now you're going to tell me that this team is worse than the other team? Okay.
Yeah.
Like, it really isn't checking out. And this is why I'm wondering if on a leadership level, meaning the coaching staff and the ownership. I'm wondering if there's a disconnect there, because it's messy out on the court, and night to night. One night we're blowing teams out like we should against teams like a Memphis and like a San Antonio, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then against the Nuggets team, you're going down by 20 against. So you have to fight all the way back. Then you take a commanding lead against them. Looks like you should have full control of the game, and then you can't score, and you let them go down and score 7 straight.
Yeah.
So it's so messy right now, and answers are all over the place. I'm sure there are answers, and I'm sure there is a move or two that the Kings could make that would bolster this roster, instantly. I don't know what that move is, and this is where our phrase of "in Monty we trust" needs to kind of come to fruition again.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's one thing that Monty knows how to do, he does know how to build a roster. And what I'm banking on is Monty to not just build a roster in his favor, but build the roster to the strength of his coaching staff. Because this is a different looking Kings team than it was in 2022. The goal is still the same, unfortunately, but how they win games now is different. And I know that their 3-point numbers are way lower, and so you think, well, yeah, and with that being said, they're probably going to take a lot more 2-pointers. But even just to start the season, they weren't taking as many 3-pointers. The idea was to get into the paint, and then if you didn't have a shot there, or if you did collapse the defense, to kick out, and then you have a shot. But DeMar DeRozan isn't an amazing 3-point shooter. So a lot of it was to get DeMar going. It was to put him in ISOs, to get him on switches, and to give him opportunities, which, ISO plays you just didn't see too much of in 2022 with this team. You saw so much ball movement, so much just running around, off-ball movement, screens, off screens. Like, these are the things that this team is different. Not missing, but just it's different now. And I'm hoping that ownership and can really take a look at this at a different level, take a step back, realize what your team is doing, not what you want to do, but what your team is doing now, because that's what you need to, in my opinion, build for. You can't be building for an idea of a system you want to run. You want to make a playoff right now to keep De'Aaron Fox here. You have to address the lineup as it is. You have to address the system as it is, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And it is going to be up to Monty to potentially save us, because at the end of the day, what we have on the floor is what we have. And those guys have to figure out ways to consistently win games as a team, coaching staff, all that. And Monty has to do his job to build this roster to help the coach win more games. So that, and help the city win more games. So it is on Monty, and we'll see if he makes some moves. Hopefully by the time we're talking next week, we're either very close to making a move or we make a move. So I'm very interested to see what we do. But we will definitely have more to talk about next week. Hopefully they are pulling off some more wins, and hopefully we're talking about how there looks like things are heading in the right direction. So hopefully we're not saying the opposite. So we'll see about that. But enough about basketball. We are going to press on. We are going to be right back. We're going to talk some football, get into the swing of things. All right, we are back to talk some football. We're going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, who are coming off of another victory, my dude. So, I want to address a few things, but I want to start this conversation by initiating the moments of the game. And I only want to talk about one moment to get this conversation going. And it's super, if you haven't already thought about it, it's first quarter, A.J. Brown, touchdown catch from Jalen Hurts right away. And they go celebrate. AJ makes a point to cut straight to Jalen. They do a little mini celebration in the middle of the field and then walk away. And I knew at that moment that we were not losing that game. I already knew it was said and done. And that's the only moment I want to talk about, because the conversation I want to bring up to you is, we talked last week. You emphasized the point of, Jalen needs to play well in order for this team to get to the Super Bowl. If they want to win a Super Bowl, playoff teams need to throw the ball well. Based off of that performance, and listen, you can take, and I'm interested to see what you want to take for the season too, but based off of what you saw on Sunday from this Philadelphia Eagles team, have they earned your trust as a potential favorite in the Super Bowl?
I don't see any other team right now that's playing as consistent ball as the Eagles. It's really as simple as that. You're
Okay.
seeing the Bills on the other side in the AFC, who are my AFC favorite right now. And they're beating the Rams one week, but then losing the next to a team they probably shouldn't be losing to.
Mm-hmm.
So, or vice versa, other way around. But
Yeah.
it's what I saw from the Eagles on Sunday was the perfect response.
Exactly.
And this was exactly what needed to happen. And in a lot of ways, I'm disappointed in the Eagles because we talked about how we wanted them to stick to the game plan and not kind of fall into the trap of needing to prove something. You've proved something enough to this point. Why would you get away from what's working? Well, damn, pass game's working too. It looked great, but there's one thing that I want to point out, and this, I'm going to kind of build off of this.
Okay.
Yes, the pass game was much better this week, but personally, I need to see it against a team who isn't 18th in the NFL in pass defense. And this week, we get that against the Commanders. The Commanders are 5th in the NFL in the pass defense.
It doesn't feel that way, which is so weird.
It doesn't, but they've done a great job schematically because they don't have amazing players featured defensively for them, but they've done a great job schematically with quarterbacks and with pass games and receivers downfield. They've kept things short. And this is something that I think the Eagles will still find a lot of success in because they did a lot of short and then yards after catch plays in last game. And so if they keep the same recipe, it's going to be more of the same, just domination throughout this game. But I do want to see it. I want to see it a little bit more this week. And because we, from a week to week basis, shift into my Niners for a second, we saw Brock Purdy put together stretches of amazing play at the quarterback position and not get his flowers and say that we need to see it more and more and more. I'm not going to give that to Jalen Hurts just yet.
That's fair.
And it's nothing to do with Jalen except for the fact of how my quarterback was treated while he was balling out and playing like an MVP, regardless of the pieces around him. It's a very similar situation that Brock has versus what Jalen has.
Absolutely.
Both of them have very, very good players, but nobody wants to talk about what the Eagles have versus the Niners because the story has been that Brock was elite. No, he's not. It's his weapons. So I need to see from Jalen more of these games put together. I've seen a few this year that have looked good now, really good. And this last one was his best game of the season. I don't know if it was his largest amount of yards, but it was, I think, his best QBR, if I'm mistaken.
Second most yards, best QBR. Yeah.
So right there, like, I can easily tell you the response was perfect. I just need to see it a few more times going into the playoffs. If you can get hot right now and show that you have a really respectable air game, which I trust that the Eagles do, but we need to see it. If we can trust that through the last 3 weeks of the season, going into the playoffs as a 1 seed, 2 seed, whatever, I'm going to feel a lot better about the chances, not just of the Eagles making the Super Bowl, but winning the Super Bowl.
And to think that we would be in this position now makes me feel a lot better. A lot of good things have come from this win alone. Listen, that was our 10th straight win. First time in franchise history that's ever happened. So that's a new thing that emphasizes, again, everyone in Philadelphia was turning on this team when they were 2-2, and now 10 wins later we're talking about the Super Bowl. So it's Philadelphia fans always have to freak out before things get better. But
keep in mind that's coming off of the collapse though, so give Philly a little bit of leeway here because I get it.
Yeah, no, and I listen, like, that's the thing. Every loss that comes our way has felt like, oh no, are they gonna just spiral and lose 6 in a row for some reason? But that's the thing with this team is just so much different because of how well-rounded they are as a whole. And listen, the whole story can be about the offense, but this team is what it is because of how effective this defense is. And listen, and this isn't like 2022. In 2022, I'm gonna, I'll call it like it is. We faced some garbage quarterbacks. We faced some crappy teams. Like we were benefiting from an easy schedule and other quarterbacks getting hurt, and we were playing backups a lot of those games and just sacking the crap out of them. So it made it a lot easier. But this year, there's proof of concept. We have played 6 games this season that featured a top 10 offense, and we are 5-1 in those games. The only one that we lost was the Bucks. So, and we're going to play the Commanders again, and they were one of the teams we beat the first time. And this game is going to be different. When we talk about this version of the Commanders, they bounced back. Last time we played them, Jaden Daniels was dealing with that rib injury. He hurt his finger in the game, and it was a little awkward, right? And that was something I wasn't that aware of going into the game. But you could definitely tell it kind of got, it was getting in his way a little bit. But these past 2 games against, they played the Titans, and I forget who they just played, the Saints. Jaden Daniels is out there running around looking good. So we're going to get a better version of Jaden. Now he's 15 weeks into the season. He's seen more now, and now they're testing, and they're also very much right there in the playoff hunt. And this could be the difference. The Eagles haven't won the division yet. This is still, the Eagles play 3 straight division games to finish the season, and this one is the most important. But I said this the first time we played them. We took advantage. When we beat them the first time, we set ourselves up to have room for error should the worst happen and we lose this game. But listen, this is a team we've had a lot of success against over the past, 5-ish years, where they haven't really stood much of a chance to us. And there's just a few matchups here that matters. Listen, the passing offense is going to be important, but they couldn't stop Saquon last time. I just don't. I would not be surprised if they said, okay, we dominated through the air. We're still going to feature the air, the pass game, but Saquon didn't need to get going last game, but I have a good feeling he's going to need to get going in this game. And it'll be interesting to see how our defense matches up against this offense this time around. It's going to be the Quinyon Mitchell versus Terry McLaurin matchup again. Will he be able to shut him down again? Are they going to try and find a different way to get Terry open? Because they look better when they get Terry McLaurin involved. And considering how well Quinyon played against him last time, it'll be very interesting to see if they try to take that same approach, because Quinyon has not gotten any worse since he's played. He's just been getting better. So the defense is going to be the matchup to watch. I've had more fun this season, and for the first time in a long time, just watching this defense play and realizing, like, oh my gosh, this is what a truly good defense looks like. Good. Like, I'm like, these are what the Niners must have felt over the past, 5-6 years. Like, when your defense is going to come out there and just clown the other team, and you're that confident in it, you don't feel as worried when you're down by 10 or when something like that happens. You're like, it's just a matter of time. They're going to come back.
The thing is, you just don't go down by 10.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly. So, and again, even that's the thing with the slow starts. Even if we stumble, we're going to hang in there. Our game doesn't begin until the second quarter.
Yeah.
But I will admit, though, with the passing offense looking better last week, I would be remiss if I didn't say that was probably a huge reason why we were able to generate first quarter points, was because we were effective through the air right away to start the game and not going 3 and out, and then figuring things out. So it does make us look a little bit more dynamic if we can be more balanced. So that will be the thing to look out for. And we have good matchups to do it against. This is it. This is going to be the best team you're playing the rest of the way. You've taken care of all the other good teams, including this team that you're about to face. But this is going to be a good matchup. Commanders have a lot to play for. They're fighting for that 7th spot because, the Rams are hot on their tail. If the Packers and the Vikings continue at this pace, they're going to take the 5th and the 6th seed, or the Lions will fall to the 5th seed. So if you're the Commanders, you're playing the Rams now. Like, you're playing the Seahawks, the Rams. Yeah. Like you're battling against these other teams that are right there with you. One loss could be the difference. So this is going to be a fun game for sure.
It is going to be fun. I'll be tuning into it. I have a theory about divisional games, and I don't know if it's like a well-known fact or whatnot. I really haven't heard this theory thrown around about divisional games, so I'm going to kind of put it out there. The biggest reason why you see divisional games go back and forth, and you see, oftentimes these split, seasons where one team wins one and the other wins another, is the team that won the first matchup tends to keep the same system going into the second game, because it was, you might work a couple things out, things that, looked a little hairy during the game, but you're going to keep the same form of attack in both the defensive and the offensive end of the field. And schematically, not much is going to change in your approach as long as the other team has a similar look. Players are still healthy and so on and so forth. The team that lost is the team that goes in with a completely new game plan a lot of the times. And this is something that I'm curious to see, on second matchups. I tend to lean towards the team who has lost that first matchup, because they're the ones who are going in with a new look. They're going to be giving this team who already beat them down in the first game, giving them a new look and you have a completely different style that I'm not going to say the Eagles or the winning team isn't expecting, but it's something that they may not have seen in the first matchup. And it's a matter of how quickly can the Eagles kind of pick up on what they're trying to hit them with and adjust and move forward with the game. So this is the interesting part about divisional games for me, is that adjustment that the losing team makes after the first game going into the second matchup that is so exciting for me. Because it's fun to watch a team learn why they lost a game, make the proper adjustments, and beat the team who beat them down in the first place. So I'm curious to see what the Commanders hit you guys with. But if you guys beat them through the air, because last game you beat them on the ground.
Yeah.
If you guys beat them through the air this time, this is going to be really interesting, because then I will be fully convinced that you guys can beat pretty much any team exactly how you want to, when you want to.
Yeah, and we also have to consider Marshawn Lattimore is actually playing for them now. Last time we played, they had traded for Marshawn, but he was hurt.
Wow.
He was hurt and not playing. He had his first game last week against the Saints, so he's back. So now they get to test their full, upgraded corner room. So that's going to be fun too. And AJ and Marshawn always have good matchups when they go up against each other. But yeah, this is going to be, divisional games are great because listen, the familiarity is a real thing. And not to mention, listen, like we could still win this game, win the two matchups, we could sweep the season series and still have to play them our first game in the playoffs. So it's like we might see them more than just these two times. And again, and that's what makes a conference, the beginning portion of the playoffs, so much fun, because you may potentially run into a team for a third time and might actually be able to come up with a win even if you lost 12 times. But this Commanders team, they're getting tested every week. They're going to be better. I'm just interested to see. This is going to be a great test for me for, the Vic Fangio defense. Okay, they've seen your defense once at its best. How are you going to respond to that? What are you going to do to change and try to find a hole in this defense? And then that would show me, what is the hole in this defense? And then, that chess match is going to be very interesting. So, Vic Fangio's got a good test against him, but these guys played so well last time, but I know it was a slightly weaker version of Jaden Daniels. So now I'm excited to see him at full strength, this team looking good and confident off of a couple great wins. So, man, like this is good, but this is, when it comes to Philly, I think even, if they do lose this game, it's not the end of the world. But for me, there's no reason to believe that they aren't capable of winning the Super Bowl, given all the other teams around them, the injuries to the Lions. The Vikings are right there, but are they the same level of team all around? Then you got, the Rams, the Seahawks, the Bucks, like all these teams that are good and potentially could surprise anybody. But then I think about them against the Eagles and the overall talent that this team has. In the NFC now, I just think that the Eagles are the best team in the NFC and have what it takes to have the playoffs in Philly, go through Philly, and then potentially go to the Super Bowl. So I love what I see from this team, and they've shown me everything. Had they lost to Washington the first matchup, this game would be a little bit more intense, a little bit more angsty for us. But I know for the Commanders fans, they're going to be, and the Commanders, they want this way more than we do. But so that we have to use we need to grab the 1 seed as our motivation. We need to find another way to get to light the fuel to win this game. I think we're going to win this game. We're 3.5-point favorites right now on the road. I have us winning. Man, it was a close game. Divisional games are always funky. I trust our defense. Do I think our offense might actually play better this time? I do. It's going to be really interesting to see. So I'm going to say it's going to be 28-21 Philly. That'll be my score.
I got 27-24 Philly. I think it'll be a little bit closer. I like what this matchup brings in a lot of ways, and even in the first matchup, it was a fun game in a lot of ways. I enjoyed watching it. I had this week circled for a lot of reasons, and one of the reasons is just because these two teams have gone back and forth historically. And I think the Eagles have a good upper hand on that matchup, but the way that each team has dismantled the other in certain seasons has been interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to see really how the Commanders come out and respond to this, to that first game, because there's a lot on their season. They need this game, and in a lot of ways have a lot more on this game than the Eagles do. I know the Eagles are playing for the 1 seed, but Commanders are playing for the playoffs. Like they have a chance to miss the playoffs still. So this is one of those scenarios. I'm just curious to see how both teams come out, who comes out hot. It's in Washington. It's going to be a loud stadium, but if the Eagles come out and start the game how they started last week, it could be a long night for the Commanders.
Yeah, and the Eagles have had recent success down there. Jalen plays really well down there, so it's going to be a fun, exciting matchup. I'm crazy to think like I'm excited to see what happens. So, and again, this the last time, this is the 4th time in history the Eagles started 12-2. Each of the past 3 times that they are started 12-2 or better, they have made it to the Super Bowl. There's a lot around this team that just feels special, and a win here would just solidify just how special they are, and would increase their chances of getting the 1 seed. And we'll talk about more scenarios for the 1 seed as they come up, because we'll find out what happens here in these next couple of weeks. The Eagles are very well, in a really good spot. So I'm excited.
I lied. I freaking lied, dude. I'm sorry. The Commanders lead the overall series 89-86, but
hey,
I was right.
Okay.
It's been a really competitive, close series. It's similar to a lot of the NFC West matchups that we've seen with the Niners. So it's cool.
I would say the turn of the century in the 2000s, the Eagles have definitely made up for that. So that's definitely been that's where we were bad there for a little while. But yeah, so we gave our scores. We're feeling good about Philly, and it's going to be a fun game to watch. So we'll see what happens there. So let's pivot on to the Niners. And listen, we don't have to talk about the game unless there's something you want to say from the game. Is there do you have a main takeaway from this?
The main takeaway is that if we bring back the same defense as this year, I'll be happy, because if they can stay healthy, they proved exactly what I knew this defense was capable of doing, and they have every reason to bring back the defense exactly how it is. And if they do so, this defense will be top 5 once again. They're a damn good defense. Even this season, they've shown the defensive spurts, but they just need that full squad.
So you said bring back this exact team. Are you sure all but one player maybe?
Yeah, all but one player, which thank God we won't have to worry about that. He's honestly a waste of breath for me. Everybody knows exactly what happened. I won't even get into the details, but that I'm so proud of my team for how they handled that. Let me just say they held on to the rest of his money. He's not getting another paycheck from them. He's not getting the reward of going to another team. He is going to sit on the couch and enjoy the 3 weeks off and not get a single dime from the 49ers. And that is exactly how it should be. You don't walk off the field on your own freaking team like that when they call your name.
Yeah.
That's just pathetic. That is the most childish behavior from a grown-ass man.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think for Devondre, it's going to be interesting because that could have been very well his last game.
It is.
In the NFL, because the Niners knew this. He complained about the Packers on his way out. He seems to just have a lot of negative feelings, and unless he's playing for a garbage team that isn't going to do well, where he gets to play, if that's all he cares about, that, and then he might get his chance. But it's just a bum. That was such a loser energy, dude. I hated that. Who's coming in. You come to this organization, who was on the depth chart ahead of you, and you have to anticipate that when he was come back, when Dre Greenlaw is healthy, that he was going to get first run at things. So it was definitely, when I saw that, I was pissed, and I was like, I would hate it if any of my guys did that, and it's rare to see that happen. So it's annoying. I'm sorry you had to deal with that.
Yeah, well, and then Ambry Thomas comes out on, I believe it was Sunday, and tweets, something along the lines of just, collecting dust over here, not getting playtime. Well, he's been sitting on IR for weeks and weeks. And before that, you weren't even our number 1, 2, or 3 option. So you're just going to complain on Twitter? Well, guess what? The Niners went and released him. So the organization, the Niners organization, responded to all this crap that these two guys did exceptionally well. And this is why I am very proud to be a 49er fan, because my organization historically has has a record of doing of holding a certain standard in the locker room, and they continue to hold that standard regardless of how crappy the season has been. There is that standard and respect level amongst that locker room and amongst these guys. And if one person acts out of pocket, no matter how much of an impact you've had on this team, you're going to hear about it. And that's exactly how they handled it. And I couldn't be more proud.
Good. I love that. So we got all the nonsense from last week out of the way. And obviously it was Thursday, so it feels like a lifetime ago. But there's been a new conversation. And I think it's because, given the state of the Niners season, 0.01% chance of the playoffs or whatever. But so like the season essentially, with the season essentially over, the conversation has shifted to next year a little bit. And the main point of interest is Brock Purdy. And obviously Brock Purdy did not play well at all against the Rams. And, you and I have kind of been creeping up to this conversation bit by bit. But I want to ask you just something. You had said that it would be stupid if the Niners paid Brock Purdy this offseason. But that doesn't mean that they won't.
Yep.
So what do you think the Niners are going to do this offseason? And you've offered your take, but if you want to stand by it again, would you pay Brock a market-setting deal of $60 million or more to keep him around?
No, and let me give you the shakedown. So, first of all, there's little to no way that Purdy plays on his fourth year if we ask him to. I mean, why would he do that? Why would he risk his body? Why would he play for $900,000 one more year? There's almost no way that Purdy plays on his fourth year without that extension. It was reported by Tom Pelissero. He said that Purdy is looking to set the QB market at $60 million. Other people, other media and analysts have said, $65 million. They've thrown that number. Well, Greg Papa, common name around the 49ers organization for years and years, he comes out and says that Purdy may get around $50 million, maybe less than that a year. It's Tim Ryan, his partner, says something very similar a few days later. These guys who are in the building and around the organization who talk to people every day, they have a number that is so greatly different than what's reported by guys who are pretty accurate on their numbers when they jump out the gates on these, right? And so you've got these two numbers being so far apart, and it just gives me a little bit of PTSD if I throw back to this last offseason with the Brandon Ayuk ordeal, and that being just a few million apart at times, and it being difficult. You want to talk about being 10 million plus apart? This is concerning, and this is something that Niners fans need to kind of brace for, because regardless of Purdy and what he holds himself to and how respectable he is out on the podium and on the field and how much he respects himself, respects the people around him, money is money. And you're going to try and set yourself up for life. These guys play football, and they have played football their entire life to get to a point where they can have this negotiation, where they can sit down at a table with their agent who's putting everything out on their line to get the max amount of money that they deserve. Brock Purdy took this team, not single-handedly, but he was a major part of why this team made it to 2 NFC championships and a Super Bowl and came damn close, went to OT to winning a Super Bowl. So we're going to discount that and say that the next year after, with all the issues, with all the injuries, with a complete lack of depth, we're going to say that Brock is a trash quarterback because of that. Now, I'm saying conflicting things because there's a conflicting feeling that I have going on. My feeling is I want Purdy to stay with the 49ers for as long as he can. If he's here for his rest of his career, that's great. I trust Brock. I stand on that hill. I think he's a damn good quarterback. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's not done growing. He's not done getting better. He's not even in his second contract yet. He's still on his freaking rookie deal. And people are saying that he hit his ceiling. So by that standard, I'm like, pay the guy. Let's build with the guy. But then on the other side of things, you had a super team of super teams, a super team of the decade They went to the Super Bowl last year and came up just short. Just short. And you're going to talk about paying a guy over $50 million. At that point, I question if you're able to actually build another super team just from a money standpoint. And this is the part where the confliction comes in, where I'm like, I don't want to pay Brock that much because I want a super team. I need a super team. We need a super team if we want a chance at winning a Super Bowl. And that's not to say that, Brock can't be a major piece of it, but he's not the elite quarterback that puts him on the top of the mountain like I said he was. Because I've seen what he looks like now with the average guys around him. He blends in pretty well at times. But when he has superstars out there, he looks like a superstar just as much. Mm-hmm. And that's equally as tough to do. So it's conflicting. The thing with me that I'm concerned of is you look at a guy like Tua, he's making $55 million a year. You look at a guy like Jordan Love, he's making $55 million a year. You look at a guy like Dak Prescott, he's making $60 million a year. All these guys set the QB market at one point, but none of those guys were the best quarterbacks in the league at any point in their career. It's a broken quarterback market in a lot of ways. To retain a quarterback at a close to, or I'll just say at a close to or elite level, you have to overpay because there's no middle class. The middle class of quarterbacks is made up of two guys, Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith. Those are the only guys who are considered middle class based on their pay. So I'm concerned.
So you made a good point because I was gonna ask you. I was like, listen, these guys that are paid in this 50 million bracket, I wondered. I was gonna ask, who you would take over Brock, and I know for each one of these fan bases that these players, get paid for, they would, at the end of the day, they would back up the fact that their player got paid and be like, I do trust my guy. I do trust the guy that we have a quarterback. Unless you're the Falcons and Kirk Cousins and you're benching them. But you pay these guys the money because at the end of the day, is there really a better option? And do you want to take a chance in the draft and try and recoup that money in return? And then potentially you get a nightmare scenario and then you're back again to square one and then you waste your skill position players and it's all this. The Niners have a recipe that works. Do I think 60 million? Would I be afraid of paying Brock that much? Sure. But compared to some of these other guys, Jared Goff, yes, he's been to a Super Bowl. Dak hasn't made it past the divisional round. Tua hasn't won a playoff game. Trevor Lawrence won one fluky playoff game where they had the best comeback ever, but that was it. Like, Jalen Hurts is the only other guy with more playoff wins. So it's one of those things that this is the market right now. And, yes, you have these guys like Mahomes and even Rodgers who did this, who would take pay cuts, but they have reached a level in their career where they can, they already have the mega deals and have already reached so many points. So I just think Niner fans need to brace themselves because when you look at some of these other teams like the Lions, like the Eagles, who have the quarterback contract, but they also do have a super team around them, the Niners can figure this out. I think this is going to be not their first lesson because they had it with Jimmy G. They reset the market with Jimmy G when he first came to San Francisco. So, and then they built that team around him. And obviously the cap was a totally different scenario, but that doesn't mean it can't be done again. And the cap is going to go up next year, even if it is only by like 10 million, but that's enough to figure something out. Niners fans
keep in mind, they had a lot of rookie contracts in play when Jimmy got that contract.
Right, and that's going to be a similar situation that they're going to be in with Brock. Now that they've recuperated all the draft capital from the Trey Lance ordeal when they lost all their picks and the CMC deal, like they sacrificed their picks to win now, and that worked for so close. But now you're back to your regular rotation of you have your first round pick, your second round pick. You can make a trade for a few more, get more young guys in the building. They hit on this year's draft class. Like, you guys have starters, capable players who can impact this team down the line. If you hit on them again, sign Brock, reallocate some of these funds with some of these aging vets, you guys are going to be in a good spot. I think then people always talk about 60 million. Is Brock really the best quarterback in the league? No, but that does not mean he's not worth the contract. He's proven that he can reach a Super Bowl, unlike half of these quarterbacks. So
exactly,
that's the same way I feel about Jalen. It's like, listen, he's gotten to a level where none of these other quarterbacks on these teams that are super confident about their quarterbacks have gotten. So, we can say, everyone can say all they want about Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. None of those boys have made it to the Super Bowl. So it's like one of those things where that's the ultimate goal. And we have guys who have done that. And those guys do deserve that, even if they haven't won it, because there's a chance. They have the best chance out of anyone to win it. So be prepared, Niners fans, because $60 million is probably coming Brock's way.
it might be, but my concern is when I hear the rumor of what the organization, or not even that, when I hear the rumored number around the 49ers in what they want to offer Brock versus what Brock wants to get, and it being so far apart, that's the part that gives me the PTSD because of what I've seen in these contract negotiations stretching all the way through September and almost to week 1 of the regular season. So it's concerning from that regard. You touched on something really good about that experience and the playoff wins and so on and so forth. Just having a quarterback who has made it to the Super Bowl and played in the Super Bowl is something I would throw $5 million more at him, or whatever the case. I would pay him more just to have that experience, because that's experience that not a lot of quarterbacks have. And to be able to be in the big dance, to have all the lights on you, every set of eyes in America damn near on you during this game, and to still perform the way that Brock did. Brock played like the better quarterback for a majority of that game. I would pay extra for that. Now, there's one name before we wrap this up and kind of start talking the next week. There's one name I just want to throw out there as a potential that we might see soon, and we'll talk about this more in the future. Justin Fields is a backup quarterback on the Steelers, and I want everyone to remember the year that Brock Purdy was drafted, the Niners did pick in the first round, and they chose a quarterback that was not Brock Purdy. It was Trey Lance. Trey Lance is little brother of Justin Fields in a lot of ways. They are very similar in the dual threat that they offer, and it's something that Kyle Shanahan has always wanted at the quarterback position. He wants that dual threat option, that ability to take off out of the pocket, to do QB draws, to do schematic trick plays with a mobile quarterback. Justin Fields is a name that I want to just throw out there, and don't be surprised if you hear rumors of the 49ers going and getting Justin Fields.
Well, I mean, hey, as a backup, it would work. That's not out of the realm. He hasn't earned a starting job. Like, he played well in the time he played in Pittsburgh, but no one's going to say, hey, you're at the end of your rookie deal. You're probably going to have to take another veteran minimum, pull a Sam Darnold and, show that you are a capable quarterback. As a backup for the Niners, that may actually work. So that would be a cool spot. Wouldn't lie.
Yeah. So the 49ers got the Dolphins this week. Again, like you said, and as everybody knows, the chances of making the playoffs are super slim. It would basically mean for the Niners to make the playoffs, the Rams and the Seahawks would need to lose out. The Cardinals would need to win their last week matchup against, I can't remember who. And then the last week matchup between the Seahawks and the Rams would need to result in a tie for the 49ers to then win out and make the playoffs. So it's a freaking disaster. We're not going to talk about it because the Niners might not even win all these games. And if they do, the odds of there being a tie at the end of the season is so low. I mean, we saw that, what was it, the Raiders and somebody else? Chargers, right? Yeah, like 2 years ago, where both teams could have made the playoffs if they just kneeled the ball, but the Raiders took a field goal and sent the Chargers packing. It was hilarious and awful at the same time. I'm sorry, Chargers fans.
I remember that.
We got the Dolphins this week. This is going to be an exciting game. I would love to just sit the vets, bro, and give the young guys run. But this is not how this team works. This is not how this organization has ever operated. And this is not how Kyle Shanahan likes to do things. He's done it before. But when your season is technically not over and there's still things to play for whatever reason, or it's close, for whatever reason, Kyle Shanahan will throw the dogs at the wall. I mean, simple as that. This team expects guys to play, specifically Dre Greenlaw, who saw some soreness coming off that injury. 11 first half tackles, by the way. Phenomenal game. I don't blame Devondre for walking off the field, because I don't think you had 11 tackles in your time as a 49er. I'm not mad or salty.
Nah.
But the odds of this team sitting down and playing their reserves and not playing, not playing their starters is so low. So the Niners are going to go for the win this week. So, from that standpoint, how you need to beat this team on the ground, simple as that. And you need to get that ground game going just like you have before. This is the Dolphins team who's been struggling this year, and they have a lack of identity in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. And a lot of that is due to injuries at different positions. Other parts of it is just changing up their scheme multiple times this season to try and adjust to teams that they're playing. They don't like to stick to their guns. And so if you can get the Dolphins a little uncomfortable, and Mike McDaniels, who's kind of a prodigy of Kyle Shanahan, if you can make them feel uncomfortable and you can get home to Tua's going to make mistakes. And as simple as just getting some pressure in his face, he's going to turn the ball over. So defense is going to be a major factor in this one. I want to see a very similar game that they played last week because, wow, the defense last week against the Rams for the 49ers was impeccable. It was incredible. It was the best defense I've seen all year. It was flashes of what we've seen the last 5 years, and it's something that gave me hope for the future going into next year. So I'm excited about this game. We'll see how it goes. I won't be upset if we lose. I won't be upset if we win. It's just another week.
Yeah, you're now no longer you're in the emotional hedge. Like, you don't have to worry about anything now. And listen, if you win, that means there's things you can build off of. And if you lose, You're like, okay, it's officially over. Draft talk. Let's go. And then we can get into it. But no, okay, let me ask you this. How much of this game involves needing Brock to play well kind of game to ease you as a fan?
Like I said, I don't need to see amazing games out of Brock to change my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty set on my opinion of Brock, and it's based on the year and a half prior to this year. This year it's not a write-off, but there was just so much crap leading in from the offseason, going into the regular season with guys missing. This wasn't the same Niners team. It's simple as that. And for me, I did just say, like, I want to see them, pound the rock and get the game going on the ground. But I wouldn't be mad if we end up throwing the ball 40 plus times, because I do genuinely want to see if Brock is able to bounce back after a game like he had against the Rams. He was horrendous against the Rams. The Rams were generating really good pressure on him. They were forcing him to make throws that he doesn't ordinarily throw. And the separation from wide receivers was awful as well. But the times that his wide receivers were open, he was so rattled mentally, whether it be his own mistakes or the Rams getting to him, that he wasn't hitting those targets. So I want to see him bounce back. I want to see that he's capable of doing so. He's done it in the past. I want to continue to see that trend. I have faith in him to do so. So if we end up throwing the ball 40 times, I want to see him complete it 30 times. If we end up throwing the ball 25 times, let me see 20. I've seen him go 20 for 25 this season already and go for 350 yards. So I'm not asking for a huge game out of Brock. I just want to see a good response. I want to see you take care of the football. I want to see you be that elite quarterback play that you have been able to produce throughout your career. And he's going to have some options out there. He's not going to be thrown to scrubs necessarily. So, I have faith in him. I think he can get this done. This is a good chance and a good week to bounce back from a game like that.
All right, then. What is your score for this game?
We'll go 24-21.
Yeah.
Niners.
I was thinking that too. That sounds like a good score. I think both of these teams are going to have good moments, but then they're also going to look a little sketchy, might sputter at times, but hopefully the Niners pull out the win. I'm right there with you.
Yes, sir.
All right. So this last part, we're just going to zoom by. So Chargers check in, just check on these guys real quick. They lost again to Tampa Bay. Tough, crushing loss. Their playoff hopes are now struggling. What looked so good just a few weeks ago is now a struggle. So we will have to monitor that. Hopefully they can pick up a win this week, but it's going to be a tough ask. So we'll see what happens here. And then betting picks of the week. I'm just going to rattle them off here and then make sure we got these squared away. So then you guys can move on and we can move on with our evening. So first one that we have for you is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road against the Cowboys. They're 4-point favorites. Cowboys are, hanging on by a thread. They find fun, different ways to lose. take Tampa Bay in this one, especially with how they have been rolling lately. Next one, another road team, the Rams against the Jets. The Jets, listen, their offense has finally woken up a little bit. Rodgers and Devontae figuring things out, but the Rams have too much to play for, and they're desperate, and they definitely want to stay with the Seahawks and keep pace for the first place in that division. So bet on the Rams this week. And then last but not least, which one did we say? I totally forgot. Oh yeah, here we go. The Tennessee Titans on the versus the Indianapolis Colts. Colts are 3.5-point favorites at home. Take the Colts. The Titans are reeling. They're replacing their quarterback again. Will Levis is sold. Anthony Richardson, this is a good game for him. So this is going to be good to take the Colts this week too. So those are our betting picks of the week. Ben, do you have any final thoughts before we head out of here?
Honestly, I'm good. Let's just get a bounce back from the Sacramento Kings. That's what I'm hoping for. I want to see some consistency.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. So we're not sure exactly if we're going to do a pod. A week from today is Christmas. So for all of you guys, a Merry Christmas. And I hope everyone enjoys time with their family. Shout out to Leaves. Happy Hanukkah to you and your family, brother. I hope everybody has a good time during this holiday break. So we will, we'll either pop up next week, maybe later next week, or maybe the week after. Maybe we'll enjoy the break ourselves. But there's a lot to talk about. So we'll see. But you'll definitely get a post-game pod from me. Ben has been excused from post-game pods given the probability of the season. I do not want to make him suffer and talk about it when there's nothing to talk about. So you will definitely get a post-game from me on Sunday, and hopefully we're talking about a win. But with that being said, this was episode 70 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up on any one of our social medias that are located up above for all you audio listeners. Links to descriptions are down below. Give us a like, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a comment. We've been getting more comments. We've been talking to you guys a little bit more. It's been fun getting your perspective and all the support we've received. We really loved it and enjoyed it. Appreciate growing with you every single day. And we hope to bring more good content to you next week, potentially. Again, enjoy your holidays, everybody. I'm Marcos Conan. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
We love y'all. We will talk to you soon. We'll let you know. Peace.
Peace.